Welcome to our webinar on breaking barriers in continuous testing by optimizing your test management. My name is Disha and I'm going to be your host for today. Thanks again everyone for joining us today. Now before I hand it off to the speaker, let me explain some very basic housekeeping items. First, this event is being recorded and it will be made available after today's session. Now, once the recording is ready, you'll receive an email with instructions on how to access the presentation as well as the recording. Second, to optimize your bandwidth for the best viewing experience possible, please close out any unnecessary applications that may be running in the background. Third, and the most important, if you experience any technical issues, please send a note through the question field that is located beneath the panels. We'll be on hand to help as quickly as possible. Also, our responses can be read in the Q&A panel. This is also the same way to submit your questions. We welcome all comments and inquiries during today's event, so feel free to ask as many as you like and we'll answer them right away during the Q&A session. We'll do our best to keep this webinar to the 45 minutes time allotment, post which we'll open Q&A session. So our today's presenter is Harshal Vora. Harshal is an experienced product specialist with solid experience in digital transformation. He has more than 8 years of experience in planning, executing, and delivering digital quality solutions in roles of solution architect, automation engineer, BA, technical project manager, and QA manager. Using weight-based analysis around DevOps and quality engineering metrics, Harshal has significantly improved continuous test coverage, efficiency, and customer satisfaction. His specialization lies in big data, healthcare, financial, enterprise, and mobile applications industry. And with this, I would like to turn over to Harshal.
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. So, as today's topic suggests, right, we are going to talk about breaking barriers in continuous testing. But before we go that, right, I wanted to start out in defining where continuous testing came into existence, right? And the biggest booster for continuous testing came out of the digital transformation, and how digital transformation demands drove towards the birth of continuous testing, and how IT industry needs to adhere to this continuous testing processes in terms of delivering the digital transformation. So we are going to talk about how digital transformation demands that continuous testing becomes an integral part of the IT processes, and then we'll see how continuous testing has been defined over a period of time. We'll also discuss about what are some of the challenges with continuous testing, and then we'll see how QMetry has been able to tackle those challenges head on. We will go over a brief overview of QMetry products, and at the end we will look at a success story with one of the largest banks from Europe, how they have used QMetry to envision their continuous testing story. So let's go ahead and start with the digital transformation, right? When we talk about digital transformation, the digital transformation came out of existence, and it had three main pillars, right? Customer experience, technology optimization, speed, and agility. And if you look at all these three, they all three tie in together, right? If the customer experience is what gave birth to the technology optimizations and the speed and agility. If you look at the Ubers and Airbnbs of the world, then they all came into existence to give customers the better experience, right? Ubers came out so that the users can go or let go of that wait times for yellow cabs, or can have this whole shared model of having those um, cabs right at the fingertips using their mobile devices. And that's where the technology optimization with new tools and technology helped give that better customer experience. Definitely the speed and agility, where you need to give your best products out to the customers to fulfill their customer experience, was also very important. So now let's see how digital transformation can be achieved, right? Uh, and the key pillars for digital transformation to be a success are agile and DevOps. And lately in the game, the continuous testing has added a big value to this whole digital transformation piece, right? So the question here is why Agile and DevOps are not sufficient enough to achieve the digital transformation. Why do we need continuous testing, right? And the answer is very simple, right? Your Agile and DevOps cycle are a very good segue in achieving your end-to-end goals. But continuous testing is a missing piece which enhances that or which takes us to that goal faster and in a better fashion, right? The recent Gartner report suggested that there has been increase in adoption of agile and DevOps, but the agile and DevOps adoption does not ensure that your products will be delivered at a faster pace, and that need for speed has given birth to continuous testing. So so let's quickly define that what is continuous testing, right? Is it a tool, is it a process, what is it, right? So continuous testing is not a tool, it's a process which is combined with tools, right? And those tools make this continuous testing process an enhanced uh, process to achieve the digital transformation goals. So as part of the continuous testing, there are four key pieces that needs to be kept in mind, right? The first thing itself is having that comprehensive testing throughout the life cycle of the product. Now, when we talk about comprehensive testing, that testing goes all the way from your unit testing to functional testing, your UI, security, performance testing, right? So you need to have this continuous testing process adhered to each and every stage of your product life cycle, so that you get that constant improvements as part of your process as well. And then the next key point of continuous testing is the ownership, right? Now, when we talk about the having testing at each and every phase, the ownership of each and every phase becomes a very important piece, where everyone of your product development life cycle is involved in the testing phase, right? Whether they be product owners, they be development engineers, or they can be your manual testers as well, right? So, and after fact, right, your business analyst as well, they all have to come back and give their feedback as part of that continuous testing process. So they own the quality of the product, right? And the third important point, which I think is the linchpin, is the test automation piece, right? So continuous testing does not mean you do more automation and then you achieve continuous testing, right? Continuous testing involves test automation as an integral part of that particular continuous testing process. And your test automation allows us to have that frequent, your testing efforts to be more frequent as well as more efficient. Uh, and the last but not least is the continuous feedback loop, right? Which will allow you to uh, enhance your processes, enhance your testing methodology at each and every phase. So when we talk about this entire continuous testing process in a nutshell, it has all these four ingredients as a key factor in achieving that successful continuous testing process. So let's see, where does our quality stand in terms of this need for speed, right? So the latest World Continuous Quality Report suggested that about 63% of the organizations say that they have adopted to DevOps and Agile, right? And most of them, they said that their current QA has been a bottleneck, right? So, and that's where when we talked about that to achieve digital transformation, Agile and DevOps adoption has increased, but still those processes feel that the QA has become a bottleneck to achieve that speed that needs to be there to deliver a better quality product at a higher speed. And that's where continuous testing comes into the picture, right? As to avoid, to overcome those bottlenecks for QA teams. And out of this 63%, if you look at it, 20% or 28% of the companies want to deploy hourly. When we talk about hourly deployments, those hourly deployments can be your production, or it can be in your staging or QA environments. Now, and how many of us would like to do this, right? I'm sure most of us would like to do this to adhere to customer demands in the customer centric or customer driven ecosystem that we are living in right now. And there are companies out there, right, who have already achieved this, uh, like Facebooks of the world, Amazons of the world, where they are able to deploy on a click of a button within few seconds, right? So and in order to get there, continuous testing or that bottleneck that QA has been proving, the continuous testing has been able to help them to get there, right? It's not the tools and technologies are only available to Facebook and and Amazon engineers, but the tools and technologies are there. It's just the right adoption of them, as well as the right implementation of those tools and technology to achieve continuous testing, right? Now let's talk about the challenges in continuous testing, right? So there are three key challenges in continuous testing, uh, and I like to call it as a vicious triangle for that continuous testing. The first challenge is the test design, right? So your test design can be at multiple phases, right? You are writing your user stories, and those test design helps you to measure the requirement coverage or user story coverage in order to give you an overall picture of your quality, right? And this test design can be in your manual test case fashion, it can be in your automated test cases or automated scripts that you have written, or it can be even your BDD or behavior driven developments or ATDD, right? So if you're following different processes, then you have different test design methodology. And the challenge here is always been um, that your test design has been an afterthought after your user stories have been defined, right? And there is no easy way to measure them. There is no tool that can help you in terms of gauging what is your coverage over a period of time for a particular user story, right? And that's where I think the continuous testing has been impediment for a lot of different processes. The second biggest challenge is the test data management, right? Now, the test data management, you want to ensure that your test data is available once you have your automation scripts or your manual test cases ready for execution, right? So, and this test data management, you always want to ensure that your data is available as and when your manual and automation uh, executions are ready to go. I'm sure many of you would be in agreement that test data management and the third piece, test environment management, are very important factors in getting that continuous testing processes, right? The test environment, again, uh, we have to rely on our IT and ops teams to get our QA environment ready or dev environment ready so that you can go ahead and have your applications tested against the test data that we want to test against, which is near a clone of your production data. And it has all the different attributes that are required for your test cases to be successful. Now let's look at each challenge in a little bit depth, right? So if, the continuous testing report also suggested, right, that 67% of organizations can keep pace with the with the ever-changing requirements, right, to maintain that right test coverage. But only like 60% end up with the gaps in test coverage despite best efforts, right? So even though they have all the tools and technologies to get that um, requirements coverage, your user story coverage up to speed, 60% still end up with those gaps. And what happens because of those gaps is they have duplicates on duplicate test cases, they have duplicate scripts, and which will create a clunk of data or a clutter of data that becomes humongous as time grows, right? And that's where we need a, a mechanism, we need a tool that can help us to have the test design in a better fashion. It gives you that intelligence that these are the user stories and these are the test cases that cover the user story in terms of the requirement coverage and user story coverage, and also help identify the gaps so that you can fulfill those gaps with optimal test design methodology, right? Rather than just going ahead and creating your duplication of your test cases. The second challenge, as we mentioned earlier as well, is test data, right? And from our own experiences, right, we see that about 30 to 40% of the time during the sprint is just consumed in preparing test data, and the rest 10 to 20% has been consumed in deploying the test data so that you have that actual test data which is close to the production, um, and gives you a very clear data set, right? For example, if you're testing your login scenario, you want to ensure that that login scenario has all the test data for valid logins as well as invalid logins, and identifying and keeping that data up to date is always an issue. We all are aware of the term golden data, right? Which is the golden data source. And that golden data source needs to be refreshed every now and then. So you can ensure that you are testing your applications against a robust data set as well as a very close clone to production. Now, when we talk about production, we don't want to clone the production data in terms of testing, because we have to comply by a lot of compliances around HIPAA and GDPR and all those compliances, right? You can always go ahead and have your inbuilt data generator tools, or you can also buy off the shelf TDM tools. But configurations of those tools and maintaining those tools is always a challenge as well. You might have the test data available for your automation, but test data availability for manual testing becomes a challenge as well. And that's where the data parameterization and the test data management has become a challenge as part of that whole continuous testing cycle. Right. And the third challenge, as we talked about, is managing the test environments, right? So the continuous quality report also reported that 36% of organizations suggested that due to the unavailability of test environments, their entire project lifecycle was delayed, right? And due to that, there were bugs that were identified later in the life cycle, which accounted for bugs in the production, or which accounted for overall increase in the cost of the product life cycle, right? And this there are scenarios in action for us where we have seen that your test data, your environment has led to security flaws being identified later in the life cycle. The latest example being the Boeing 787s or 737s, where that the software had a flaw, but due to the lack of overall test coverage measurement, overall test data availability, and test environment availability, we saw that it was not available, and there was a big flaw which was released to the production. Now let's quickly talk about how QMetry, right, is helping organizations overcome these challenges. And QMetry, just to give a brief overview, is built for agile and DevOps teams to overcome the challenges of continuous testing by providing the test management, test automation, and test analytics solutions, right? So, as I said, right, this vicious triangle of this three challenges, QMetry helps overcome the test design, test data management, and the third part, which is the test environment, is not out of the box as part of the QMetry solution, but there is a small integration that enables that infrastructure management easy as part of that whole process, right? And when we talk about the test design, we want to have a robust SaaS-based solution which is available to everyone, and it can be visualized by everyone, rather than it being just in a Word document or in an Excel document as part of the test design methodology, right? You want a test authoring in terms of having your BDD or having your test cases integrated with your, say, GitHub or Bitbucket kind of tools. Then we also want the test data, right? You want have that execution to be against your test data, and that test data definition as well as that data parameterization is enabled by QMetry. The integration with the test automation tools, whether you're using Selenium, you're using Jenkins, you're using Cucumber, TestNG, all those integrations come out of the box as well, which enables that whole continuous testing at each and every phase. When we talk about unit test, performance test, functional test, that comes out of the box as well. And last but not least is the quality analytics, which is that continuous feedback loop that we want to ensure is always available, right? Now, some of the best practices of continuous testing are as part of the QMetry, as I already mentioned, right? The support for multi-channel, whether you're testing your web application, your mobile application, or or even at APIs, right? You want to have a view in your test management solution where you can write your test cases, associate this test cases to your user stories, and uh, that will ensure that ownership of quality for all the different users, because we are bringing the collaboration for all the users in one tool, right? Where your product owners, your testers, your engineers, they all can go ahead and look into the quality of the product, whether you have enough coverage, whether you have enough test cases, whether those test cases have been passing, failing. All those different challenges can be overcome using a single platform. Using QMetry, we also promote shift left testing, right? So we want to promote in sprint kind of automation processes, which enhances that whole continuous testing process to give that push in terms of better uh, quality and faster speed. Drive for automation is also there with the CI/CD, right? When we talk about continuous integration, continuous delivery kind of tools, we want to ensure that we have that integrations with those tools. Your test management software, irrespective of whether you're doing manual or automation testing, needs to have integrations with your newer generation tools like Jira for Agile and Jenkins or Bamboo for DevOps. With 140 plus reports already available, you get that continuous feedback loop as to leverage those analytics. Right. So let me quickly go ahead and walk through the product. So let me just quickly, as I mentioned, it's a SaaS-based solution, so I can just quickly log in, and it will give me that overall view within the dashboard page itself, where what kind of users to what kind of test cases are being executed, whether those test cases are passing and failing. You get those defect reports in here, and as I mentioned, right, you want that coverage, you want that test case design being available in here, right? So when we talk about the test design challenge, right, your test cases can be defined right in here, right? You can go ahead and define your test cases. Uh, and then once you define your test cases, you can write your test steps in here, all those test steps and everything. Once everything is defined, you can go ahead and associate those test cases to your requirements or user stories. And those requirements or user stories are being available in here, right? So if you look at it, these user stories are, for example, this is one of the user story where we have synchronized this with Jira for which is being used for agile project management, right? And that Jira information has been pulled back into QMetry, so your testers, they don't need to go back to Jira to visualize what are the details for this user story, and they can go ahead and start writing test cases on top of those user story right in here, right? uh, as far as the collaboration goes, if your engineering and development team, and once you click on this an entity key, it will open the Jira view, and your engineers, your product owners, they can view all the test cases in Jira itself, right? So that's where end-to-end traceability, end-to-end collaboration comes into picture when we are talking about QMetry, that gives you capability of test design and also that traceability from one product to another product, right? The second thing that I wanted to talk about was the data challenge, right? So we talk about the test data management, and that's where we have the data parameters and data grids available, where you can go ahead and define your test data right in your test management tool, right? So you define the test data where you have say customer ID and then associated name, address, city, and you create a data grid out of it, right? Say for example, this customer data set is what I'm interested in, and I have created that customer ID, name, address, all the different parameters right in here, and those parameters can be consumed not only by your manual testing but also by your automation testing. So that open architecture that QMetry has abided by gives the users capability of utilizing this data management as part of their automation as well. And last but not the least is the continuous feedback loop, right? So you want to ensure whether you have the best coverage or not, right, for your user stories, and whether those user stories have any kind of defects associated or not, right? So you can improvise on the fly during a particular sprint, and that drives you towards that continuous testing, right? So let's quickly go back to the presentation and see how one of the largest bank in Europe, ABN AMRO Bank, they achieved continuous testing utilizing the QMetry set of products, and what were their key challenges when they embarked on this journey of continuous testing, right? So uh, the key challenge is when ABN AMRO decided to go to digital transformation about 6-7 years ago, were to overcome the legacy tools. They wanted to get that whole continuous integration, continuous delivery processes. And when they started on that, right, they realized that in order to get the continuous delivery or continuous deployment, they need to ensure that continuous testing has been done at each and every phase during the product lifecycle. Their other biggest challenge was the geographically distributed teams with about 1,000 plus testers, how they collaborate on a platform that can give them better visualization of their test design as well as test coverage, right? And that's where that digital transformation become a kind of uh, a non-starter when they didn't have the right tools, when they didn't have right processes in place to overcome that challenge, right? So the solution or approach that QMetry took was to go ahead and organize a hackathon for their agile teams and give the access to QMetry toolset to the users, or 350 plus testers, where they can go ahead and build integrations with their with their test data management, with their test infrastructure management, as well as their test automation tools, right? So which gives that end-to-end flexibility in terms of continuous testing when they are trying to achieve, say, unit testing integration or performance testing integration as part of it, right? So um, and the migration out of their existing tool set, right, which is a legacy tool for application lifecycle management, they wanted to get out of it and get to a tool that can give them a better integration with their user story management tools like Jira, also integrations with tools like Jenkins, right? So as part of the key takeaways, I want to let's do a quick recap, right? We started out with talking about digital transformation and how digital transformation led to the birth of continuous testing as part of our IT ecosystem, right? And um, what are the key challenges of continuous testing? We talked about the vicious triangle, and then we talked about how QMetry can help overcome those challenges in a very subtle manner, right? And how ABN AMRO Bank benefited by utilizing QMetry platform to achieve continuous testing. But there is a fourth key piece which is missing in this puzzle, right? And I wanted to spend few minutes talking about that fourth piece, or the missing piece, right? And that's where we hear this buzzword in the industry, which is AI and ML, so artificial intelligence and machine learning based testing. And that's where the cognitive authoring piece, which ties back to that again test design methodology, the intelligent automation piece, which again ties back to your test data management, test infrastructure management, comes into the picture. And for continuous testing, we also talk about the continuous feedback loop, and that's where this whole predictive and prescriptive analytics will be um, uh, will play a very key role as part of it, right? So, and some of the benefits for those uh, this technology would be realized when we want to ensure that that cognitive authoring ensures that we have the right coverage, right? Just imagine if you are working in a sprint and you say, I am working on a sprint, I have features that will be impacting my transaction module, and the cognitive authoring piece gives you that these are the different test cases that you should include as part of your test design. um, that will be a game changer, right? So rather than you going ahead and finding those test cases from your thousands of test case repository, there is a mechanism which gives you that these are the test cases that should be utilized for a particular execution. That would save a lot of time and energy, and again gets that automation back into that whole process, right? Again, with the predictive and prescriptive analytics, we'll be able to plan better and predict things better in terms of getting that end-to-end life cycle. And that's where I think the continuous testing will be a very integral part of it. And at QMetry, we are constantly working on improving and getting that processes more aligned towards better quality and higher speed. So we are working on this AI and ML based features to give continuous testing a boost so that QA never becomes a bottleneck for DevOps teams.
Excellent. Thank you, Harshal. This wraps up our webinar, and thanks everyone again. I hope that this session helped you all in understanding that how QMetry helps you in adopting continuous testing to fulfill that exact need for speed without compromising quality. You'll receive an email to download today's recording. However, if you need to contact us sooner with some more questions, please feel free to reach out to us via our email, which is marketing@qmetry.com. You can also reach us by phone at our US number, which is 408-727-1101. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Till then, take care. So thanks everyone for joining us today. I hope you have enjoyed this session. You'll receive an email to download today's recording. However, if you need to contact us sooner with some more questions, please feel free to reach out to us via our email, which is marketing@qmetry.com. You can also reach us by phone at our US number, which is 408-727-1101. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time. Till then, take care.